I was experimenting last week with resin and seeing what a few bits and pieces would look like inside it. And one of the successes were coffee beans. And it's what I've got here. So it's a whole load of coffee beans cast in a block of clear resin. The effect was a lot more interesting than I was probably expecting at the time. So what I'm going to do now is make another one of them, but I'm going to try and cast the coffee beans in the centre of a piece. And so what happened here was the coffee beans tended to float to the surface, so they kind of all congregated on the top. So what I'm going to need to do is have 2 pours of resin, so basically make another one of these, but while it's still in its mould, pour in more resin so it seals over the top, giving me a solid block with coffee in the middle. To stop the resin sticking to the surface, what I tried last time was using blue painter's tape. I thought the greasy surface would stop it kind of sticking, but unfortunately it had almost the opposite effect because it's a very textured surface. The resin really went into the cracks and it formed a very strong bond between the outside, so I had to effectively sand this away. So what I'm going to try this time is kind of silver foil tape. Now, I have no idea at this stage if this foil is going to work. It may prove to be a brilliant solution, or it might go on the list of materials never to use for this kind of purpose. I've also put some silver foil on the sides here, again attempting to stop it sticking. Find out in a few days whether this has worked or not. So you end up with something pretty ugly, but it only needs to survive a day or two, and then you need to kind of break it all apart. Hopefully this will do the job. Now for this project I'm using some nice fair trade Italian style beans, which make a rich full-bodied coffee with a sweet aroma, but obviously you can use whichever beans you prefer. What I'm going to be using for this is a resin called GlassCast, because it kind of dries glass clear, and that's from a supplier called easycomposites. You need a hardener and the resin itself, and that kind of mixes in a 2:1 ratio. For this pour I'm going to go for 90 grams in total. Last time I kind of had 150 grams, and I got this piece here, which is slightly thicker than I want to achieve for this one. I also had a load of excess material, which I kind of poured elsewhere, so I think 90 grams should do the job. With everything mixed, it's time to pour it in. What I'm doing now is just kind of shuffling the coffee beans just to try and get a fairly even distribution. So it's been 24 hours since the last pour, and it seems to have dried pretty well, which means the mixture was correct. So what I'm going to do now is mix up another batch and pour another layer on top. When it dries, this stuff is pretty tough, so I don't want it to be too thick, because that means there's going to be more to sand away. And I want this to be the same thickness top and bottom in the end. That goes back on the shelf for another 24 hours, and then tomorrow night I get to pull it all apart and see if this has worked. So it's now been 24 hours since the second pour went in, and 2 days since I started this, and it looks really cool. It's set, and it's kind of looking, yeah, it looks really clear. Everything seems to have kind of gone very well. What I need to do now is try and break it out of the frame and see whether my decision to use the silver foil was the right one or not. That, it's come clean off. I really wasn't expecting that to be a good decision. I kind of regretted it, but that's perfect. So this has come off the silver foil perfectly. You can see the slight ridges where the tape marks went in. And it's also evident how far the resin has poured underneath the glue, so it's kind of really seeped through. The next step now is to try and split this apart. That is perfect. So much better than I was expecting. So what I need to do now is sand this down to give me a perfect kind of clear finish all the way around. Now that this is down to a perfect uniform state, I can switch over to the palm sander and hopefully start to bring out the coffee beans again. So I finished sanding this with a 240 grit sandpaper. I'm going to switch down to something higher and hopefully give it another go, and then it'll be on to polishing. With it sanded down to 320 grit, I think that's the highest I had, I'm now going to switch over to like a buffing wheel, just to do a little bit more, and then a final wheel just to give it the final polish. So I'm really pleased with the result of this. I've got a perfect kind of square cast coffee bean unit. So the two pours went really well. There's no sign of the join. The sides are, you've got a coffee bean slightly exposed a little bit and sanded back, which I think adds a little bit of character to it. Yeah, it makes for a very nice kind of coffee table coaster.